And bonjour, everyone. Niigaan Indigenous. My name is Niigaan Sinclair. It's great to see everybody for part Nisui, part 3 of our workshop. And let's get started. This workshop is brought to us from the Create to Learn project, which is sponsored by Taking It Global in partnership with Imaginative. And it's how to write and share your story. And as I mentioned before, this is part Nisui, part 3 of a 4-part series. And we've been going along talking about how to write your story. And just to remind you all the way back to what was said in workshop 1, which was that your story is valuable. You know, your story is really important, and it's part of almost a responsibility as a storyteller. Like if you've been given that gift of telling stories, you're a person who likes to explain to people what happened, and you also like to, you know, make people laugh or sometimes make people cry. Or if you're a storyteller, you have that need to tell that story. So your story is important. It is part of our long trajectory as Indigenous peoples. It is a part of you making a footstep in creation and going forward and putting us forward as a people, as a nation of different peoples who are all across Turtle Island as different Indigenous peoples from different communities. Your story is valuable. Now, just to remind you that use the hashtag Create to Learn if you have any feedback from this workshop. And if you want to contact me, you can reach me at Twitter at Niigaan or on Instagram at Niigaan, or if you want, you can go to my Facebook page, which is Niigaan James Sinclair. I also have an author page. You can reach out, see some of my writings. And if you want to see some of the different things that I'm involved with. So I'm a professor at the University of Manitoba in Native Studies. I'm also formerly a high school teacher, and I've been an activist in Winnipeg, involving in movements and different activities. But these days, what I am is I'm a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press, and so you can actually go to the Winnipeg Free Press, Google my name if you want, or if you go to the Winnipeg Free Press on Tuesdays or Saturdays, you can see pieces that I've published, and some of them are free online, some of them are going to involve a subscription, and so yeah, check it out. But let's get started. This workshop's in 4 parts, and so we have already done Bishik, which is what is your story. We just finished Niij, which is creating your story, and we're on day 3, the 3rd workshop, which is Nisui, recreating your story. And we're going to be talking about today is editing. Like, how do you take a story from a kind of the events that we got together, we worked on some first lines, and now you've got a story that you've began to work with, and you've got the 500 words that you began to create. And you remember the last assignment that I asked you to do, which is to come up with that story, practice that story, and then bring it to this workshop today. You have all the different elements that we spoke about. You have the narrative arc, you have the 5 elements, you have the issue and the theme that you're addressing without saying it, so without, you've got the description, you've got a dialogue, or maybe you've got a scene, or you've got something involves conflict and then stakes, why is it important? And then you even got a concluding line that you really worked on. And so you've got a 500-word story right in front of us, and you've got really the first, what we call the spine of the story. It is that you've got the story, you've got the idea, and for most days, for me as a writer, that's the biggest struggle. It's the biggest struggle to get from A to B, which is you got an idea, that takes some effort. So we did some activities to get you ready. And then now we're at point B, which is we've got a story, we're ready to go, we've done a draft, and we're ready to begin to show it to other people. Now, writing is easy. Like, it's hard. A to B was hard, but now editing is where you turn into a professional. Because when I hear people say, oh, I'm going to write my story or whatever, you never hear people say, oh, I'm going to edit my story. You'll see people say, I'm going to write my story, because editing is where you become a professional. Professionalization of your writing is where you begin to go through it and through it and through it. And what oftentimes writers will say is that you get almost sick of your own voice. But that's why writing isn't something that you can just pick up and do whenever you want, or just anybody can do it, because anyone can really just write down anything. But to make it clear, to make it concise, to make it make sense, to make it something that is memorable, is editing. All of those things happen in editing. They don't often happen in writing. Sometimes they do, but most often it is editing that turns you into a professional. So here are some tips for you to remember that when you're becoming a writer. I follow many of these myself, which is to write every day, have a routine of some kind, which is you have a space, to also read and read and read. And, you know, we were all reading all the time. Sometimes it's emails, or sometimes it's, you know, it might be, you know, magazines or something, or maybe it's whatever it might be, or maybe you're the kind of person that reads a lot of novels or poetry or books or whatever. But read and read and read, just constantly be reading. And when you're reading, look to see what you liked in other writers, and then borrow those techniques. Always have a notepad handy. Like I always have, you know, piece of either a booklet, or sometimes you get those moleskins, like those little booklets that are about yay big, and always have one on you. Put it in your bag, or put it in your pocket. Just carry it around you at all times, because you never know when the story idea comes up. And then write down in the back of that book story ideas or techniques that you like. And we're gonna talk a little bit about cliches today, because cliches are really the killer of all good editing. You know, if you can have an amazing story, but if you have one cliche which is predictable, then people will just go, and then they'll, you know, turn away from what you've written. Always try to finish what you're starting and get feedback, and then you kind of constantly be working on different ideas and practicing your writing, which is where I wrote down there and there and there. Learn the conventions of writing, practice your writing, learn to spell, learn to, you know, your grammar, the techniques of grammar. And not everybody has to write the same. In fact, that, you know, if you don't write the same, that's the best way that you become well-read, is people enjoy your writing technique. But you still have to make sense. You still need to have a pronoun, you still need to have a verb, and you still need to have a subject in your sentences. That's why writing short sentences is way more powerful than writing long-winded sentences that oftentimes lose interest halfway through. Just remember that not every poetry has to rhyme, or if you do, you don't have to write in a way that looks in paragraph form. You can also try different techniques. And we're going to talk a little bit in the next workshop on the number 11, 12, and 13, which is rejections, and expect some backup of your work. Always have a backup, and then, you know, just always try to break the rules. And if you break the rules, that's what your story itself will be breaking a rule, because Indigenous peoples were really never expected to live beyond the 19th century. And so here we are writing about our lives and writing about our expressions, and we are consistently reminders of our own continuance as a people. Now, the most important thing you will do as a writer is you need to self-edit. And self-editing, once you've got a piece, now you've got your 500 words right there. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to put it aside. You're going to step away from it for at least a couple hours, maybe a few days, sometimes a week. Don't go too long though, but step away from it for a couple hours and just put it aside. Go visit with a friend, go for a walk, have a cup of tea, enjoy, you know, take a breather. And what I tell you that is because you need to get away from that work. The biggest issue that will stop you from self-editing is your emotional investment in the piece. So if it's a piece that's really important to you, really tender to you, really personal, what will stop you from editing it is if it's too personal. And that's why you need to get distance from it. And that's when you need to go back to it a couple days from now, that'll help you. And then once you get there, then you read it aloud. Read it aloud to yourself, and then the first read that you do is non-judgmental. Do not even look at grammar. Don't look at spelling. Don't worry about all that stuff. Just read it through and say to yourself, okay, all right, is this a piece that how much editing does this piece need? Most oftentimes what you're going to find is the writing works in a third writing and then 2/3 editing. So whatever it takes for you to write, it'll take you 2 times as long to edit. So if you took an hour to write a piece, it's going to take you 2 hours approximately of editing time to make the piece into a finality. So into a piece in which you're proud and you're ready to send it off to publishers, or, you know, publish it in a book or whatever that might be. So you're going to have to read it aloud. And so this is, you know, read it aloud to yourself, have somebody else read it to you, and then begin to listen. And this is where you can begin to tinker a little bit. And that's where I'm going to tell you, be ruthless with yourself. There is nobody who is going to be more invested in your work than you. So be hard on yourself. Be fair, but also be aware that your criticism of yourself will be legitimate. And so trim those sentences, cut those paragraphs. Make sure that no paragraph, if they are long paragraphs, are no longer than 5 to 7 lines. When I'm saying 5 to 7 lines, I'm talking about 5 to 7 sentences. I'm talking about 5 to 7 lines on the page. I would actually prefer paragraphs that are even less than that, you know, five more than 7. Then sort of figure out what is your word count. This is at some point where you want to think, okay, where would this piece begin to live? Is it a newspaper? Is it a magazine? Is it a kind of place like a short story or creative journal where they don't give you limits, or maybe they give you limits of 10 to 12 pages, which tends to be anywhere between, you know, 3 and 3,500 words kind of thing. And, you know, figure out a word length. Like a typical op-ed that I work with is 800 words. And so just to show you what that looks like, I'm going to just show you briefly the piece that I've been sharing for the past little while. I'm going to pull up the piece that I've been sharing with you a few times now. Which is the piece that I wrote about my grandfather. And so just to pull upon you and to get you to think about what 800 words look like. This is approximately 800 words. And I want you just to look at the size of paragraphs, for example. Also look at the kind of shortness of the sentences. And then also just look at how long that really is. 800 words is not very much. What you'll find is that, you know, you should hit a conflict by, you know, about 1 to 200 words. You should hit stakes by 300 to 400. And then you start heading towards the conclusion by 500 words. And then you're pretty much done. That's an 800 word piece right there. And never to mind the fact that your stories and location come out almost in the first 50 words. And so you've really got a short amount of time in which to work. Go back to the PowerPoint here. Your ability to self-edit will be what defines you as a writer, because that'll take you to the next stage. Now, here's where you're ready to start showing it to other people. And what I call, there's 2 different editors. And I take this from a very great friend of mine, a professional writer named Richard Van Camp, who's a Talicho writer. And, you know, he comments that there's 2 different types of editors out there. There is what we call the refrigerator love, and then there's the professional love. And they're both loving, they're both supportive. Anyone who reads your work, by the way, is supporting your work. So take that attitude to know that even people who say rough things to you, they're still invested in your success. So every single person who reads your work is interested in the success of you. So the first is, the refrigerator love people are people like your parents. They're people like your friends, or they're what we call your first readers. They're oftentimes going to say to you mostly positive things, maybe occasionally a critique, but generally they're going to tell you, oh, this is so amazing, this needs to be shared. And that's good, because it'll help build your confidence. Then there's the professional love people, which are people like teachers and editors and what we call the second readers. The second readers are where you're going to begin to get your skill development. So use editing for the right purpose. Refrigerator love is really for your confidence and to see what's working. And your professional love is there to see your skill development and to see what's not quite working, or things that need improvement, or things that need more emphasis. So know that the editors give you different gifts, and to try to define yourself, who is my refrigerator love supporters? That might be your partner, or that might be your mom, or for me, sometimes it's my daughter. And then who's your professional love? Who are those who are you're sharing? Those might be people you work with. Those might be a teacher from high school or university. Those might be another writer friend of yours. And you really are asking for professional criticism there, skill development. And don't take, oh, it's great, as just a response. Really probe and say, no, it's fair, you know, and that's why it's important to come to these writing stylistically, to think to yourself, okay, I'm always working on my skills. You know, writing is like a muscle. And so here's some tips. Watch out for cliches. Those are things like, cliche is like anything that's predictable in writing. Things that, that, you know, anyone that does writing can say things like, trying to think of a good one. A cliche is it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and you're like, oh, that was something else that somebody's already written. They're conventional, predictable sayings or phrases. Don't use those. Vary it up, or try using different metaphors. Then also show, don't tell. So use scenes. Don't tell us everything that's happening. Just give us little pieces, words, ideas, images. Like, we don't need to see the car accident. In fact, it's probably more interesting to see what's happened after the car accident, or the sign that's been knocked over, or the impact of that accident, maybe how someone feels about that accident. Watch for repetition. Style is all about finding out how do you become a writer that people can see rhythm in. But repetition most often is like the flat tire syndrome, which is saying the same thing over and over again. So when you're reading, if you hear the same phrase over again, or the same way that you're saying it over and over again, sometimes those are the same adjectives. You might use beautiful like 4 times in one sentence, or 4 times in 2 sentences. That's what's called the flat tire technique, which is like thump, thump, thump. You don't want to be a flat tire writer. You want to get rid of those styles as early as possible within your drafting. Shift your perspectives around, think of different pronouns, and then trim, trim, trim. Cut, cut, cut. Particularly adverbs and adjectives. Those are those descriptor words. Make your sentences really small. Oftentimes when I see writers use lots of adverbs, which are the ly words, like typically or beautifully, or adjectives, which is words that describe, the adjectives that describe, don't be stuck on those things that are constantly describing. Just tell us what it is and just move on. Watch your sentence. Like, shorter sentences are better than longer sentences. And now you're ready to share it. Okay, so now you've got your 500 words. You're ready to figure out who's your refrigerator love, who's your professional love, and now it's time to edit. Find yourself an editor. And remember, just be humble. When you hand it to somebody, you're really offering a gift to them. So pick somebody carefully, but also pick somebody in which you're ready to take feedback from. Say miigwech for all that feedback. Thank them. Be open to all of the criticism. Record all the comments and feedback. That's sometimes where it's good to write on your drafts or write on your notebook. Save all your versions if you're on the computer. Have one file for one story, and just have the constant version 1, version 2. Sometimes you get up to version 36. And then start thinking about, where is the story going to live? And so I want you to go now, and I want you to find yourself an editor for your 500 words. All right? Now, this is the end of part Nisui. The next final part of our workshop, which is Niiwin, Publishing Your Story, part 4. I want to say huge miigwech and thank you for all of your time and for continuing to stay with this workshop. It's been a lot of fun for me to set it up for you. It's also been a lot of fun for me to imagine the stories that you are writing now, and you are partaking in this wonderful journey of writing and sharing your story, because your story matters.